I'm the publisher and editor of FromRome.Info, an electronic journal for news, information, and commentary about Rome, the Vatican, the Catholic Church. Live here on the Via Conciliazione, just outside Vatican territory. You can see the beautiful Basilica of St. Peter and the Christmas display, and at the end of the street there. So this is my first report in English today. I will do another one later, which will be a meditation entitled From the Death of Pope Benedict to the Triumph of the Immaculate Heart. If you would like to hear that in Italian, it was just published at FromRome.Info and in video on this channel. Now I will give a summary of the news of the day, and I have turned on chat so you can ask questions. So please do, if you have questions, this is your chance to ask from someone on YouTube who's actually at Rome. The first thing I'll say is there has been a lot of talk and speculation and social media activity following the death of, even before the death of Benedict, as soon as it was announced that he was sick, at his death and following his death, from people on social media that are not in Rome, don't know what's going on, can't even read Italian or Latin, and, well, you can listen to what they're saying about the news, but do they really know anything about it? So if you like the reports at FromRome.Info, please share them. FromRome.Info is an electronic journal founded in 2013, and when I came back to Rome in 2019, I upgraded it and turned it full-time, knowing that eventually would come the day that Benedict would pass, and that's why I'm devoting now a lot more news coverage than you probably have seen from Rome in recent years. And that is to thank all you, my viewers, for having supported me, and to give you a view on the news that you're not going to find anywhere else. So if you like the news you find in From Rome, please come to FromRome.Info, read all my articles, and if you can, send me some support. Since my expense is going to be much higher now, and I'm currently using a car that's ready to go put. So hello to everyone from around the world who's watching. And I love all my viewers and followers in the English-speaking world. That's most of you following, but I have followers in other countries too who know English and follow, so that's good too. So now a summary of the news of the day. So the Vatican published the Mass booklet for the funeral Mass that will be celebrated for Pope Benedict tomorrow at 9 in the morning, and it will go from 9 to 10:30, and it's a ticket-only affair. So if you're in Rome and you want to attend that, you had to get tickets at the door of the Vatican before, I think, 7 o'clock tonight. And if you don't have tickets, you're only going to be able to watch it on television, pretty much. I don't think there'll be, you might be able to find some tickets still available in parishes. If you go to a local Catholic parish here in Rome and beg the pastor if he has any tickets left over, he might give you some. I don't see how else you might be able to get one, because they're expecting a huge crowd. Probably around 250,000 people visited Pope Benedict as he lied in state. And so there is a lot more interest than the Vatican expected. The city of Rome only expected 30,000 people to visit on Monday, which was the first day of public exposition. And more than 100,000 came. And yesterday was even a greater crowd, so I think it was more like 250,000. Now, today Benedict is not, isn't in for exposition, but the crowds here are still tremendous. So I do think tomorrow we might see 500,000 people here for the funeral of Pope Francis, which will irk a certain person in the Vatican who wants to be the center of all attention, and we'll find out that more people are coming to this Mass than came to any of his. So in the Mass booklet, though, we see that there is still a battle going on between two factions in the Vatican. When Benedict died, as I mentioned before, it was immediately announced that he would be buried on Friday the 6th. But Friday the 6th here in Italy is one of the high feast days of the year. It's Epiphany, and Italians celebrate Epiphany like Christmas. So celebrating a funeral on a Christmas-like feast was like totally bizarre to Italians. But that shows you that someone was very happy that he was dead, and that it was a real Christmas present to bury him. However, the clergy of Rome and the cardinals wouldn't stand for that, because according to the papal law, Universi Dominici Gratus, a Roman pontiff must be buried on the 4th, 5th, or 6th day after he dies. And since he died on the 31st, that would have to be no later than the 5th. So a battle broke out, and this side that wanted Benedict respected won out. And that was a good sign. so the funeral was moved to Thursday. Yet it was still announced that Pope Francis would preside, even though he can't stand anymore because of his problems of inflammation of the knee and his excessive gain of weight, we'll say. I guess he's like Italian food. It's better than Argentine. And but what has now been announced is that the Dean of the College of Cardinals will preside at the Mass. Bergoglio will only be listed as the presider in the booklet, but the actual Mass will be presided over by the Dean of the College of Cardinals, Cardinal Re. Okay. So Cardinal Re is a Piedmontese cardinal, and he was like the right-hand man of John Paul II, the ordaining bishops. He's co-consecrated with Pope John Paul II more than, I think, 180 bishops. And I published today at From Rome a very interesting article that I wrote 3 years ago called The House of Cardinal Re, which shows you how much influence he might have in the hierarchy and in the Vatican by reason of the fact of all the bishops and cardinals he has consecrated as bishop. I also wrote a letter to Cardinal Re 3 years ago, and you might find that interesting. But Cardinal Re was appointed Dean of the College 3 years ago when the college elected him, because according to canon law, the College of Cardinals elects its own dean. So the fact that they elected a cardinal that John Paul II created, one of the older and more respected cardinals of the Roman Curia, Cardinal Re, was a strong sign of criticism, you might say, of Bergoglio. They didn't elect one of the cardinals he made. And that was a good sign, and that might be explaining what we're seeing. So Benedict was not going to be laid out in state as a Roman pontiff, but as a merely retired bishop. There was a battle over that, and there's kind of like a halfway job done between the two. You see the side, one side probably wanted the red shoes, but he only has black shoes, and he should have had red pillows on his head, these small little details, and he should have had the pallium, and he didn't have the pallium. There were no flowers put around his casket, and only 2 days of exposition, and a really lousy embalming job, probably the worst embalming job I've ever seen in my life. And you know, to play games over someone's funeral like that is really the lowest kind of knavery, and it shows you that there are two factions in the Vatican, and one has wants to respect Pope Benedict, and the other is hates him with all their guts. The Mass for Pope Benedict will be also unusual in this, and that it will be the first time since the 6th century that the Gospel won't be chanted in Latin, and that the Roman canon won't be used. I think it's in the first time in the 4th century. So this is really shocking that a Roman pontiff will be buried without the Roman canon being said, which names all the saints of the Roman Church. The Vatican is claiming that that is the personal preference of Pope Benedict. Well, I think you can read my face whether I believe that or not. And but it's very interesting that these decisions have been made that have kind of shown more respect to Benedict than the faction that doesn't like him. And the principal man we must point as responsible for that must be Cardinal Re. And I think he is realized that now is his moment, his golden moment of opportunity. Because since there is no such thing as a Pope Emeritus, Pope Benedict must be regarded as have died as a Roman pontiff, whether you believe that or not. So it's a presumption of law. And that means the cardinals must follow the papal law for the election of a new Roman pontiff, part of which includes the burial of the Roman pontiff, Pope Benedict XVI. This is one thing that many people don't understand, that the College of Cardinals is kind of like a burial society, in the sense of once you become a member, if you die, everyone attends your funeral, or they pray for you. And they always pray for past popes, but it's especially of the Holy Father. They pray for past popes. They all attend his funeral. They all seek to help him. So, with the death of Pope Benedict, the College of Cardinals has gone into action in a way that shouldn't really surprise anyone. So there are a lot of voices saying the cardinals aren't going to do anything. The cardinals won't say anything. But that's just totally uninformed. Clerics spend their whole life trying to get promoted to the level of cardinal, and once they get there, they want to exercise the few little rights they have when they have them. So after the death of the Roman pontiff, it's the College of Cardinals that runs the church until the election of the next pope. And These strong moves to give honor to Pope Benedict in his death may add to the argument I have explained at FromRome.Info that I believe the cardinals are going to do a lot more, and that they're going to at least try to end this controversy over the legitimacy of having two popes, who has the Petra and Munus, by calling a conclave and re-electing Bergoglio. Or they might even, since they'll all be in town tomorrow for this funeral of Pope Benedict, they might even pressure Jorge Mario Bergoglio, Pope Francis, to resign, because his health is so bad he can't walk around. And if they all are unanimous about that, that's going to solve a lot of canonical problems. Because if Pope Francis resigns, then there is no pope, and that makes it much more certain that they can arrive at a valid election. They still have to solve the problem with more than half of the members of the College of Cardinals were named cardinals by someone who didn't have the Petra and Munus, and therefore they cannot enter the conclave and vote. And if they do, it will be an invalid election. And a lot of people worry about that and have claimed that there's no possibility of a valid election. But I believe that Cardinal Ray, with his long experience in the Roman Curia, and I think he has a doctorate in canon law, understands that if the Bergoglian cardinals agree to accept the election made by the cardinals appointed by John Paul II and Benedict, and not enter into the conclave, that they can arrive at an election discussing things before the conclave begins without violating the papal law and creating another legal doubt to who would be the new Roman pontiff. And I don't think this is out-and-out crazy conjecture, because no one wants to be pope with an albatross hanging over him. Okay, that's an expression from a very famous English writer who wrote a novel about the curse of the albatross. And it escapes my mind his name right now, and you could add it in chat. So that's not unsurprising. So this is one of the hopeful developments that could happen, and we might see the announcement as soon as after Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Now, against that possibility is news that's come out of Venezuela. A news agency there said that the College of Cardinals has already decided not to call a conclave. Well, it's hard to say one news agency in Venezuela is making a statement like that. I know that Parolin was the papal nuncio to Venezuela, so maybe someone there has inside. But Parolin is not going to make this decision. Cardinal Ray is going to make this decision, and he probably will not make the decision until he hears from all the cardinals in town tomorrow. And they're probably going to stay over after the funeral. And that's where we might see things happen, because the College of Cardinals is very upset that in the last 10 years they have never been convened in consistory. One of the rights and duties of the cardinals is to assist the Holy Father in the government of the Church. And to be a cardinal and for 10 years not to be asked what you think about how things are going in the Church is an extremely severe indignity. And so it's not crazy to think that after Benedict is buried, that the cardinals might start talking about their dissatisfaction with this and insist on at least a consistory being called and discussing what is to be done. Now, it could be that there's a faction of cardinals only in minority, and they want a certain thing to proceed, and nothing's going to be done because the majority are going to hold that Bergoglio is a valid elected pope. But the cardinals still have another way out, is they can ask the bishops of the ecclesiastic province of Rome to convene a council, a provincial council, and make a decision whether Benedict had the munus until death. Because if they were to obtain a positive vote on that, they could then pressure the cardinal dean or the rest of the majority of the cardinals to call a conclave. However, here we have to understand that Cardinal Augustin Ray does not have the discretion not to call a conclave. And this is something that most people aren't going to talk about. In the papal law, the cardinal dean must call a conclave after the man who held the Petra Munus dies. And He has the right to call that, and no one can question him in doing that. Although if he doesn't, the cardinals could always vote him out of office and go ahead with the conclave. So Cardinal Ray really stands to gain if he does, because the conclave is a procedure in which there's not only a secret voting for the Pope, but there's like 2 weeks of meetings of all the cardinals together discussing the problems in the church. And that would be a wonderful occasion for all the cardinals to hash this thing out, because the church doesn't need 10 more years or 20 more years of legal controversy over who's the Pope or the resignation of Benedict, which was heavily misunderstood by many people. So it would be in the advantage to do that. And I wrote Cardinal Ray 3 years ago a letter in Latin asking him that to be done. And now it's the time where he can do that without anyone questioning the matter. And it will make him one of the great cardinals of history, one of the great cardinal deans of history, if he has the courage to do that, which certainly harms no one's right and threatens no one, and will give the College of Cardinals back its rightful place in the church to answer really grave questions that need to be raised and have been raised in the last 10 years of the so-called pontificate of Pope Francis. And the course which has been pursued, which is scandalizing the faithful gravely around the world. I don't know how many clergy keep writing me and asking me, they're so scandalized by what's going on, they can't make heads of it. They don't know what to do. And this, not just us Catholics who believe Benedict was Pope until his death, who just don't want to go to Mass where Bergoglio's named anymore. More than half of the faith around the world don't go to Mass anymore after the churches were closed in the recent years. So it is a very serious matter, and it should be addressed. There are also some minor news stories. I want to thank publicly Kennedy for criticizing Frad for calling us Catholics schismatics merely before we believe the Pope is dead. I mean, that's ridiculous. And we're not Sede Vacantes either, Tim Gordon. So, but I think Kennedy's exposition, his video I published at FromRome.Info, what I liked about it very much, it was a very mature ecclesial exposition. It's the kind of thing you would expect from a learned Dominican who's been a priest 20 years, and this guy is a married man who was only a mechanic. I don't think he even took a course in theology, but he's has a lot better Catholic sense, even though I don't agree with him on every position, than either Tim Gordon or Matt Frad or Matt Gaspers. Okay. So, but to answer the things that were said in that video, I think I need to respond to is, everything he said was right, except it seems like he doesn't know how to get from facts to a conclusion, that he doesn't know how to reason. And that's not surprising. He hasn't taken courses in theology. Maybe he hasn't even taken courses in logic or philosophy. Okay, so you can never say a question is above your pay grade. If someone says, here's one, how many do I have? You can't say it's above my pay grade to say 2, okay? But of course, you understand the principles of mathematics and how to add. And if you don't know canon law, then okay, you don't. And so you don't know how to handle the conversation. And one of the interesting things that you shouldn't be neglected is in all the controversies over Benedict's renunciation and whether he's still a pope or not, one side refuses to even discuss canonical principles, because the question is a canonical one, so you must use canonical principles and apply them. And the hard thing everyone's having to do this is that people who present themselves in public as canonists, some of whom are, because they have a doctorate in canon law, are just absolute liars. I mean, they'll see 1 + 1 = 2, but they know if they say 2, they'll lose their job, and they'll lose all their friends and won't be invited to cocktail lessons. So they'll say 3, or they'll say 0. They'll say something else, which is extremely dishonest. But we live in a very dishonest age where a lot of experts won't tell you that, yes, if you take that, it will kill you, or no, if you take that, that actually help you, So I can understand the difficulty many lay people have on not being able to know how to resolve this controversy because they don't know the principles. If you know Latin, or even if you don't know Latin, at least get yourself a copy of canon law and read it. And you'll see, if you read it from the beginning, that it's easy to understand and has its own principles of interpretation. And you can come to an understanding of what these things mean. You don't have to ask a canonist what it means, because canon law is not some secret science that has to be decoded. Okay, it's not like a Ratzinger code. Okay, so it's plain and simple right fact. And but be sensitive to the fact that the vernacular translations are totally worthless and are only a guide. So on this controversy, you have to go back in Latin and look at what canons use the word ministerium and what canons use muneri. And that's not really difficult Latin. You can see that. And you'll see that nowhere in the Code of Canon Law is the Roman Pontiff or any of his duties defined as a ministerium. And therefore, when he renounces that, there's really no legal argument you can make that he renounced what he is or what he should be doing. And that's the simple argument. And if you know of a lawyer who's not a Catholic and is an expert in the transfer of property titles, he's probably the best advice you can give, because he'll give you some basic principles of jurisprudence on property title transfers and show you where precedence and where presumption lie in a dispute over who owns something or who is holding an office. And that will help you understand this controversy much better. So the other news is that Archbishop Ganswein is going to publish a book of his memoirs of serving Pope Benedict, and it's coming out next week, which means it was already printed and written before the death of Pope Benedict. Now, at From Rome, I expressed myself strongly on this, and I do think strongly because I don't think that high clerics should publish books to make money. Your duty as a man of God is to preach the word of God, but I can understand he might be concerned about his future. But if you're going to tell the truth, start saying it open right from the beginning. You know, as a men of God, we are obliged to tell the truth 24/7, not to become so polite that we use some delicate language to hide what we're really saying. I mean, you know, that's not how Christ talked. So that was the second point in news. And if you, I don't know if it's going to be sold on Amazon, but you can look for Archbishop Georg Ganswein, his memoirs of his time with Pope Benedict. But I'm sure it will be filled with lots of information, and I hope the translation, I hope it comes out in English. I think it's only coming out in Italian originally, but it'll surely be a popular book because everyone will want to know more about the private life of Pope Benedict XVI. That's pretty much the summary of the news today. If you have questions now, I will respond to them. And oh yes, various cardinals are making statements. Cardinal Zen criticized Benedict for being silent. Cardinal Pell praised Benedict for acting like a true Roman pontiff and teaching the faith rather than hobnobbing with the powers of the world. So that's unusual that both have made comment. Zen that would make a comment of criticism before the funeral. And that Pell who's previously criticized Benedict for his renunciation, would say something nice like that. So Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, came and paid his respects to Pope Benedict yesterday and was greeted by Archbishop Ganswein. And I have heard that the President of Portugal will attend the funeral tomorrow, in addition to the official delegations of Germany and Italy. It's kind of strange that no other nation is sending delegations, but that shows you that Benedict was not chosen by the globalists and that they extremely don't like him. You won't see that at the funeral of Bergoglio, I don't think. I think you'll see every nation there, even if he had resigned beforehand. And they'll be calling him a saint, you know, for long in the future because he did pretty much everything they wanted him to do. So now I'll answer questions. Let's see. If you have any questions, ask. I see most of your comments. I will put a question mark so I can see that it's a question. Oh, okay. Michael Zumega, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Zumega. Brother, do you think that anything will be revealed about how Benedict XVI wanted to deal with Fatima? Ganswein might tell us something like that, but I'm not certain because one thing is clear about Pope Benedict, he didn't really explain his decisions to everyone. He made a lot of decisions, private ones. Maybe that will come out further. See, Benedict was involved in the partial revelation in the year 2000, and that he was only allowed to reveal partially at the decision of Pope John Paul II. So since Benedict's very devoted to John Paul II, I don't think he felt that he should criticize that decision. And I think he persevered in that prudential decision of John Paul II. And I think that's why he never did anything in his pontificate about that. But, that was his decision. And before God, I personally wouldn't have done that because I think I'm the kind of person I think my loyalty to the Mother of God would be superior to my loyalty to any man, even if he was Pope. But I guess I'm a kind of a strange kind of Catholic. But you have to understand hierarchy well if you're going to be a Catholic because you know who your superiors are. So then I got a question from Vera. Brother, what do you think about the speaking of Ganswein to Radio Vatican 3 hours ago? Is he a traitor? So I didn't hear his talk 3 hours ago. I have seen his interview with that came out the other day and was published in Republica. My opinion of Ganswein has varied. Actually, you are watching me now because I got a phone call from Ganswein on the 11th of January in the 2020. Well, I was sick in bed and couldn't pick it up, and he left a message on my answering machine, and I still have that recorded. And that message made me entirely totally outraged me because it seemed to be he was trying to threaten me to not investigate what went on and telling me to shut up and stop what I was doing. And I resolved then, no, I would do the exact opposite. So that's why I'm here today. I later let Andrea Cianci listen to that phone call recording, and he thinks that maybe Ganswein was using Codice Ratzinger with me, was speaking anthropologically to say what he could say when he couldn't really say what he wanted to say. Now, I concede that Pope Benedict spoke that way because he couldn't get his message out other ways. But now that Pope Benedict is dead, there's no reason for Ganswein to speak that way. So I'm still not certain whether Ganswein understood what Pope Benedict did or whether he learned this language and he's using it to survive an ecclesiastical career by speaking in such a way that everyone might think he's saying the nice thing. So if you're a man of God and you by status and dignity, but you became one because you wanted a career, then that might be a prudential thing to do. But if you became a man of God because you want to serve Jesus Christ and give your life to the last drop of your blood in his service, in his loyal, faithful service, that's not a way to act. So I was like, for the longest time, 80% certain that he was more with Bergoglio than with Benedict. And I have long suspected that he was put around Benedict from the beginning by the St. Gallen Mafia to control him. Remember the letters stolen in 2012 were stolen from the desk of Archbishop Ganswein. He did apologize for that recently, and I'm glad he did that. But his latest expressions were saying there's only one Pope, and he is called Francis. Well, you could maybe Codice Ratzinger explain that to mean that's what people call him, but I don't think that you can apply that anymore. And I asked Andrea Cianci about that in my interview with him 2 nights ago, and he gave his opinion. But it doesn't convince me. I think now that time has passed. People need to speak openly. And if he continues to speak that way, then I don't think you can say he's an ally of Pope Benedict. He might know what Benedict did, but he's certainly not courageous to speak the truth clearly and sincerely. Maybe he's just trying to save his own skin because he doesn't understand the counter reaction that our Lord is going to inspire in the church now that Benedict is dead. Okay, so next question. How can this ultimately be resolved if no cardinal will step up? Diana, your question is a very good one. Actually, the cardinals have the statutory duty to act. And if they fail to act, it's very grave, but then they sacrifice all their rights. So in canon law and in papal law, the cardinals don't have the exclusive right to elect the Roman pontiff. They only have the exclusive right to elect the Roman pontiff if they begin a conclave within 21 days after the death of the Roman pontiff. So this is their unique opportunity, and if they don't make use of it, they're really shooting themselves in the foot. But if they don't, then the faithful of the Church of Rome and the suburban diocese can elect the Roman pontiff by resorting to the application of apostolic right, where they can each Catholic resident for more than a year at Rome or in one of the dioceses bordering Rome has one vote, and when they meet together, they decide who they will want for their bishop, and that person would receive the patronumus, because that's the way all the popes in the beginning were elected. And when the papal law has no application anymore, then there is nothing preventing the recourse to that right. So, and I did an article on that from Rome, and why within a month we'll have a new Roman pontiff, and I explained that. So. Okay, so Fabio, the Twitter account called Georg Ganswein is not run by the Archbishop. It's run by, as far as I know, a priest in the English-speaking world. That's because he doesn't have on his keyboard the German letter for Ganswein with the A or the two dots over it, and sometimes he writes it AE. So I wouldn't take anything credible seeing that. I've seen that account tweet out, give Fav tweets to soccer team information. So I don't think it's the Archbishop at all. So don't read it that way. Okay, any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, so if you have a question, ask it. So I'm trying to think. Other small news is here at Rome, a lot of people have come just to see what's going on. And people are coming from all over Europe. I even have some friends coming from Poland and are in the city, and I hope to see them. And if you are one of the people who follow me on From Rome and are in the city of Rome and like to meet me, I will be transmitting from Castel Sant'Angelo at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So you can find me there. Because I am not going to attend the Mass. I didn't get a ticket because, well, I'm not an accredited journalist, so I wouldn't be able to use my tripod. So what could I really say from it? But from the outside, I hope to be able to. I will be giving some interviews and talking about the events, and I will follow closely the homily that is given. If Cardinal Ray gives a homily, that will be significant. He's the dean of the college, and if he starts raising the topic that something has to be done about the course in which the church is headed, then I think that will be a strong indication that he's going to move to call conclave. Michael, no, I personally don't plan to be on Twitter. I've been on Twitter before. No one appreciated me, so I'm not on Twitter. So I don't even have the time hardly to publish my own journal and to write articles for it, so I don't have Twitter and stuff. So, but you can share the articles from them on Twitter. They're getting a lot of people mad, so that means they're being effective. Any other questions? Any other questions? So you get a chance to ask questions, right, about what's going on in Rome. And you can see now that as the sun set, the beautiful lights of St. Peter's Basilica are going on. And I hope you all can hear me well with this earphone I have. And let me know if the sound quality in this video is good so I can adjust it in my next one. I will do another English language service, I think at 7:30 Rome time, so that's going to be in an hour and a half, something like that. And I will talk about from the death of Pope Benedict to the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, the importance of Benedict's pontificate and the crucial moment we are now in the history of the Church. So, okay, Sweet Harmony, thank you. And saludo a Roberto Parde in España. And tengo muchos seguaces en España en el mundo hispano. Muchas gracias a todos vosotros por seguirme. That's the little Spanish I know. any other questions about the current events and stuff? Maybe you've heard something claimed by YouTubers or Twitter accounts or other social media personalities in the English-speaking world claiming or making claims about what's going on here in Rome, and you'd like it verified. You might have heard about the dome turning black. The dome didn't turn black. They started a cleaning job on it some years ago, and they used acid, and that doesn't look good on a copper dome, and that's why it has that awful color. But it didn't just turn that way overnight when Benedict died. That is like an urban myth. Any other questions? You guys, any other questions? I'll if I get more questions in the next 6 minutes, I'll keep this going because I scheduled up an hour for this. Otherwise, I will end the transmission and get a bite to eat before my next one. Now, if any of you are from Poland and know Archbishop Lenga, please, on my behalf, invite him to come to Rome. We'd love to hear him preach and say Mass for us, a Mass in suffrage for Pope Benedict XVI. And he isn't much appreciated in Poland, I hear, but he's very much appreciated in Rome. He'd fill a church because he speaks so clearly about these things. Paolo Pandolfi, I don't know what you mean by that, so... Okay, Mary Paz, New Orleans, okay. Greeting down there to New Orleans, the New Orleans folk. I've never been to New Orleans. I was thinking of going there, but then it was wiped out by a hurricane. But I hear the Cajun cooking is good, and I have occasionally eaten Cajun food, but not the real stuff. Maybe someday I'll get down there, and I think I'll like it, because being half Sicilian, I love seafood, and I don't disparage spicy food. So I've seen some of the recipes, and I hope someday to get to New Orleans. So thank you for that greeting. And you have asked me a question. Well, if you don't put a question mark on it, how could I see? But let me look again. Okay. Did you mention Ganswein's statement about Benedict's pain in reading Traditiones? No, I didn't mention it, and it is an important thing. It's among I think Michael Matt even tweeted out about this. It's like, how could you observe Traditiones Custodes if you knew that it broke Benedict's heart? The actual German that Ganswein used is more correctly translated, he read it with heartfelt pain and suffering, which is pretty much the basic same thing. So, well, who couldn't? I mean, that document is just so absurd. It flies in the face of everything Benedict did. Even Benedict's document, Summorum Pontificum, which I read very carefully, and I was interviewed on radio in New York when it came out. I read it with some concern too, because I've translated a number of medieval and Renaissance papal bulls. So I know what is in a papal bull. And at the end of Summorum Pontificum, Benedict didn't even impose the obligation that it be accepted. But Benedict got a lot of flack for that. And the fact that Bergoglio should undo it shouldn't have surprised him, because all the bishops in Italy and most of the bishops in the world were really against that document. And this goes into the problem of appointing bishops. If you appoint bishops who are friends of politicians who want to change the church, you're not going to get bishops who want the Latin Mass. So I entirely believe that statement is true, that Benedict's heart was broken when he saw that document come out. That shouldn't surprise anyone, and anyone with a good sense of the Catholic faith should have felt the same way. So, but that disproves what many have claimed, who claim he was a modernist, that he didn't really have his heart behind that document, Summorum Pontificum. So that shows that Benedict was Catholic to the end. One of the important news things I wanted to point out is that the last words of Pope Benedict was, "Jesus, I love you," and that shows that Benedict, to the last moment of his life, knew he was the Roman Pontiff, because on the shores of the Lake of Galilee, after the resurrection, our Lord appears to the apostles and takes Peter inside and says, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "I think well of you, Lord." And then our Lord says, "Do you love me?" "I think well of you, Lord." Then the third time he says, "Do you love me?" And Peter says, "Lord, you know that I love you." And so Benedict, in his dying breath, told us he was the Roman Pontiff, the successor of St. Peter. And that is a documented fact, tested too by the witnesses around him in the moment of his death. And It's an ancient principle of law. The words out of the mouth of someone in the moment of their death are the strongest and most irrefutable testimony. Courts accept that above almost any other statement. So if anyone out there is claiming that Benedict didn't think he was Pope, well, Benedict refuted that with his dying breath. Diana B. So the Mass for Pope Benedict tomorrow should be a Mass for the in suffrage for the Roman Pontiff. So during the canon, there should be no mention of anyone else. Now, will that happen? I don't know. But I'm not attending the Mass because, you know what I would think. So, but here we have to distinguish. The correct term is a Mass, is the consecration of the sacrament, the confection of the sacrament at Mass valid? Is the Mass licitly celebrated, which is a twofold question, is the Mass efficacious? And that has to do at the spiritual level. So if a validly ordained priest or bishop uses real bread made from wheat and real wine made from grapes, and he says the words of institution of Christ and a liturgy in doing what the Church instructs us to do, a priest to do, then there is a valid consecration of the Eucharist, even if everything else in that Mass is crazy. The only thing that would prevent that is if the priest publicly said he didn't believe in transubstantiation, then that would be put in doubt. So that's called sacramental validity. Okay. Then there's licety. A Mass is licit if the priest had authority to say it. And that depends on the permission of the local bishop and many other factors. That's canonical licety. Then there's moral licety. Was it licit for the priest to do that? Well, let's say the priest decided to do something in the liturgy that the rubrics didn't allow. It would be morally illicit for him to do that. So if a Mass is licit or not, that may not have any effect on us Catholics. Might be only a legal or moral problem for the priest. Then there's the efficaciousness of the Mass. If the priest is in the state of grace and he says Mass, the Mass it has an imperatory value, that is a value to obtain from God grace for the priest, for the congregation, and for the whole Church. And if he's a holy priest, even more. And if the laity participating in the Mass are in the state of grace and are holy, even more. So that's why it's an old tradition in the Catholic Church to have Masses for our loved ones celebrated in monasteries of cloistered nuns or monks, because we trust that their prayers will be more heard in God when it's an observant monastery. So the mere fact that Bergoglio would be named in the canon of the Mass as Pope doesn't mean the Mass would be invalid. It does mean canonically, for someone who knows he's not the Pope, it would be canonically illicit and morally illicit. But someone who doesn't know he's not the Pope, it would neither be canonically or morally illicit. Its impetratory value, it would have no impetratory value even if they thought Bergoglio was the Pope, because Christ just wouldn't accept it. And if you received communion at that Mass and you knew Bergoglio was not the Pope, you wouldn't receive Jesus Christ, you would commit a mortal sin. Because Christ is not physically present in the sacrament, he is only sacramentally present. So you can only receive him under the conditions he sets. So if you know you're violating the divine law and receiving the sacrament, you don't receive Jesus Christ at all, you receive condemnation. And this is why you can't receive Jesus Christ in schism. You cannot knowingly receive Jesus Christ in schism. You can't knowingly receive Jesus Christ at a black Mass. You can't knowingly receive Jesus Christ at a heretical Mass, or even if the sacrament is validly confected, because you can't snatch him. Okay, so. Okay, Michael Savina, your question about was Benedict and Archbishop of Vigano in friendly terms and communicating? I don't know, because Vigano said that he once wrote Benedict a letter and it got to him. When he asked Ganswein about it, he said he didn't know anything about it. So a lot of people, and Vigano said that Ganswein had intercepted his letter. So I can't say that it is. One thing I find strange is after the death of Benedict, I don't hear Ganswein saying anything. So if any of you know about a statement Ganswein has made after the death of Benedict, about the death of Benedict, please let me know, because I'd like to hear what Archbishop Vigano is saying. Yes, Paolo, it's definitely a slap in the face, but this is just another example of the two factions in the church and how extreme is the division among them. And so I'm now going to end my transmission here for news. I will do another transmission in English later from the death of Benedict to the triumph of the Immaculate Heart, where I will explain the moment in history we're in and how important it was the pontificate of Benedict, and how we should look forward to the future with hope and trust in our Lord and our Lady. Thank you for joining me here at FromRome.Info. I will post this video at my FromRome.Info site, where you can share it with your friends and family once it becomes available on YouTube. God bless. And yes, Paolo, the resistance should, but if you're going to resist him, first say he is or is not the Pope. The people who insist he is the Pope and then try to resist him are really involved in a ridiculous affair of bashing their heads on a stone wall, because they undermine their position right from the beginning. God bless you. Ave Maria, one and all.